Hello, welcome. Dr. Sushma Singh this side. Today in Unit 23, WTO, GATT, GATS, Capital and Human Flows. We are going to start our lecture on General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, GATT. Let us briefly discuss some aspects of GATT. The first one is agriculture. Agriculture is an item of GATT has been widely discussed and debated. Under this agreement, countries are allowed to use some non-tariff measures such as import quotas and subsidies. According to WTO, the objective of the agricultural agreement is to reform trade in the sector and to make policies more market-oriented, with a view to improving predictability and security for importing and exporting countries alike. Thus, the agreement on agriculture related to market access, domestic support and export subsidies. According to WTO, the agreement on agriculture does not allow governments to support their rural economies, but preferably through policies that cause less distortion to trade. It also allows some flexibility in ways of commitment which are to be implemented over the period of time. Developing countries do not have to cut their subsidies or lower their tariffs as much as developed countries, and they are given extra time to complete their obligations. Least developed countries do not have to do this at all. The arguments which are usually raised against domestic support prices or for the subsidized productions are that these encourage overproduction, squeeze out imports, lead to export subsidies and low price dumping on world markets. Hence, the developed countries agreed to reduce the agricultural support price by 20% over 6 years starting in 1995. The developing countries by 13% over 10 years. The developed countries again agreed to cut the value of export subsidies by 36% over the 6 years starting in 1995, and the developing countries by 24% over 10 years. The developed countries also agreed to reduce the qualities of subsidized export by 21% over the 6 years and the developing countries by 14% over the 10 years. Now let us move to the health standards and safety. Another important aspect of GATT is the maintenance of standards and safety in order to protect human, animal or plant life or health, provided that they do not discriminate or use this as discussed protectionism. Here the member governments are to use international standards. However, WTO has allowed individual members countries to apply a scientifically justified higher standard, thus allowing them to use different standards. The next point is textiles. This is a contentious area of GATT. Until the end of the Uruguay round, trading in textile was governed by bilateral agreements or unilateral action in terms of established quotas. Under the quota system, countries could impose a limit on import of textiles into the domestic market. However, under WTO agreement on textile and clothing, this sector is to be fully integrated into GATT rules by January 2005 to bring to an end the quota system and to end the discrimination by the importing countries between exporters. Now let us move to the next point, General Agreement on Trade in Services, GATS. GATS was formulated in the Uruguay round against the backdrop of the phenomenal expansion of the service economy all over the world. Let us explain some important aspects of GATS, especially its coverage, obligation, and discipline. The first is coverage. The agreement covers all internally trade services, for example, banking, telecommunications, tourism, professional services, etc. It has been defined in 4 ways: modes or trading services. The first is service supplied from one country to another, for example, international telephone calls, officially known as cross-border supply in WTO jargon, or Mod 1. Consumers or firms making use of service in another country, for example, tourism, officially consumption abroad, Mode 2. A foreign company setting up subsidiaries or branches to provide services in another country, for example, foreign banks setting up operations in a country, officially commercial presence, Mode 3. Individuals traveling from their own country to supply services in another, for example, fashion models or consultants, officially presence of natural person, Mode 4. Now the next point is principle of GATS. Trades in these services according to GATS are to be governed by the following obligations and disciplines: most favored nation treatment, MFN, is the cornerstone of GATS, whereby equal opportunity is to be given to service providers from all WTO members. However, there was a temporary exception to honor for a period of 10 years, starting from January 1995. The already preferential agreements the member countries signed with trading partners. The second is GATS binds commitment on market access and national treatment to all WTO members. According to WTO, the commitments are virtually granted conditions for foreign exporters and importers of services and investors in the sectors to do business. It is important to note that the government services which are not applied commercially are not subject to GATS commitment. The third is, it is obligatory on the part of the government to make all relevant laws and regulations governing services public. The governments also have to notify to WTO any changes in the regulations that apply to services. Fourth is, GATS stipulates that the member governments should regulate services reasonably, objectively, and impartially when they set standards, prices, safety measures, etc. The fifth is recognition of other countries' qualifications. The licensing or certification of service suppliers must not be discriminatory. The sixth one is progressive liberalization of the services sector is a goal of GATS, which is to be achieved through negotiations. Here we want to close this lecture. Thanks for listening.